Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video and this is for Drag Race Season 16 Episode 14. Today we're going to be recapping what happened in this week's episode, going through the result of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a little bit of recent drama that involves Plain Jane and a mandatory meeting calling out toxic Drag Race fans. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start with recapping the episode. The queens come back into the workroom after Morphine Love Dion's elimination, and the queens were saying that that was actually their favourite lip sync between Morphine and Sapphira. There was also a little bit of playful shade between Q and Plain Jane, but also Plain Jane and Nymphia, with Plain Jane saying that Nymphia's partner looked like a Muppet. And Q was saying that Plain Jane just wore breast cups and a leotard, and Plain Jane said that her and Q have a kind of sibling rivalry. So the queens come back into the workroom and they find out the mini challenge this week is that the queens have to do a kind of underwater lip sync called Aqua Boogie. And I thought this was really fun. We've never seen anything like this on Drag Race, really. We've seen things where they do like leaf blowers in people's faces, but I thought this was just a really fun way to kind of switch up the mini challenges. And I thought it was funny because some of the queens didn't necessarily seem to know the words that well to the song, and I couldn't quite tell whether this is just because they're doing it in water, so maybe it's harder to move your lips, but RuPaul even made a comment about this and said that a few queens seem to not know the lyrics. And Sapphira won the mini challenge, and I do agree, and I thought this screenshot of Sapphira was just so funny. One thing I also found quite interesting, and they did talk about it, is that Sapphira's breastplate is a lot bigger than it was at the beginning of the season because they had made those comments about her having a kind of Fisher-Price, your first ever breastplate. And I did hear that there were some rumours circulating online about the new breastplate that Sapphira had, and people were questioning how she got it. And in an Entertainment Weekly article with Q did bring this up and said that Sapphira got a new breastplate. And she didn't say how she exactly got it, but some people took this to mean that perhaps production bought it for Sapphira. However, I don't know if this is actually true, but it is an interesting theory because we do know that the queens do get things from production if they ask them. But it would be interesting to know how Sapphira got them and if production did give them to her, because it was certainly something that was a talking point in this episode. So we find out that the main challenge for this week is that the queens have to write their own memoir. They also have to do a photo shoot for the book cover, and then they have to do a podcast episode talking about their memoir. The queens then get to work on their memoirs, and it's clear that some queens, such as Nymphia, are struggling more than others with the writing, and they also are discussing whether they should be funny or serious in their memoir. They then move on to the photo shoot, and Nymphia was first. I really loved, in general, how hands-on RuPaul was being. I don't think we've ever really seen RuPaul be that hands-on with a challenge like this. I thought Nymphia's outfit was really cool, and I thought her end book cover was really interesting, and I thought her outfit was really cool, which is obviously what we've come to expect from Nymphia. Next we had Q, and at Roscoe's she did say that she had run out of clothes at this point, so this outfit she actually made in her hotel room the night before this photo shoot. So I think it's quite impressive that she came up with this quite quickly, although the judges didn't really seem to like it that much. In general, I thought that Q seemed perhaps a little bit less sure what she exactly wanted, but they did show a few nicer photos of Q, but I think the ultimate photo they chose was not the best. Next we had Sapphira, who definitely seemed to know exactly what she wanted, and I think RuPaul even recognised that. I really loved the outfit with that long ponytail. And RuPaul really seemed to be having a lot of fun with Sapphira. And then finally we had Plain Jane, who was doing the more comedy route compared to some of the others. And RuPaul even made a slight comment about this, saying, are we going to take some more glamorous shots rather than just funny ones? So moving on to the podcast episodes with Matt Rogers. And first up was Plain Jane. And I think Plain was definitely the one who was trying to do the more comedy but also slightly shady route. And she brought up her feud with the mandatory meeting. And then she also slightly shaded the other contestants. And I thought it was interesting because Matt Rogers, as well as the edit, seemed to be showing that Plain Jane was being too shady or was being shady unnecessarily. But I did kind of feel like, although she was being shady, that's what we know Plain Jane for, and I do feel like they kind of set her up for that with the questions that they asked Plain Jane in the interview, because she got some questions that they didn't ask other people about, can you say something about your competitors? But I do agree with the judges' critiques that we didn't necessarily learn that much from Plain Jane in this interview because she mainly talked about the other contestants. Next we had Sapphira Cristál, and I thought she absolutely smashed this interview. She's such a naturally funny and charismatic person, and I loved that she just had a quick response for every single question that Matt asked her. And in general, I think Sapphira comes across as someone who's very comfortable and confident within herself, which means that she can just give answers really off the cuff and come across really well. But I thought she had enough emotion and tenderness in there to also make it seem really genuine and interesting to listen to. Next we had Q, and I thought that she did pretty well in this. I liked that she talked a little bit about her background and we learned a bit more from her. In general though, I'm not sure if it's just the edit, but I feel like they didn't necessarily show that much of Q's personality in this interview compared to some of the other contestants. But overall, I still think she was very charming, and I thought it was really nice that she talked about her humble beginnings and her background, because we haven't necessarily heard that much about it. And then finally, we had Nymphia Wind. I think Nymphia did really well in this interview, and I think the reason that she came across so well is because so far, Nymphia has been relatively guarded, I think, in this competition and been relatively careful about what she's been saying. I think she told that funny story about going on the date, which kind of ended in disaster. So I think she had enough humour in there, but I think she also opened up in a way that she hasn't necessarily done so far. So I think she did come across probably the best in these interviews. Okay, so let's now move on to the runway, and the category for this week was Fandango, or in other words, something to do with fans. As usual, I'm not going to critique the actual fashion of these outfits because it's just not my thing, but I will say at the end which one was my favourite. So first up we had Q, who said that she's wearing a really fun, structured orange fan tutu, and it then goes into this tight little corset that is beautifully encrusted. She also mentioned that she has a huge fan back piece and it's framing the ornate hair that she's wearing. And she's saying that she's giving a little bit ballerina vibes. Next we had Sapphira, and she chose to walk it like an African queen. And she's giving you African fabrics, and then she has these pleated fans, which is a reveal. And Sapphira said to look up Roberto Capucci, the fan. And I did look this up, and for those of you who don't know, Roberto Capucci is an Italian fashion designer. And it seems that he has multiple dresses that he's designed that have this kind of fan style element to them. And so it looks like Sapphira was using this for inspiration in her outfit. So next we had Nymphia Wind, who said that she was doing the Asian version of Marie Antoinette. So she said she's wearing a period style dress with clouds and dragons and also waves on it. And she's also fanning herself because she realises that she's so hot, and there's a reveal that under her skirt there is a fire. And then finally we had Plain Jane, who is doing a kind of Aphrodite goddess look, and Plain said that she is eloquently floating down the runway and descending from Mount Olympus. And she said she's wearing an encrusted armour piece and is feeling like a true goddess with multiple Ds in it. In terms of my favourite for this week, it was really difficult because I thought all of them did such a good job. I think that I will have to give it to Sapphira personally for this runway because I thought that the reveal of the fans was really cool. And I think of all of the queens, it was probably the one that was giving fan the most because it really was the biggest centerpiece of the outfit. But let me know in the comments which of the outfits was your favourite. So moving on to the judges' critiques, I was a little bit surprised with the judges' critiques this week in general because usually with the final critiques on the final episode, the judges are usually relatively kind and don't really say anything negative. But in this episode, they did give quite negative critiques to several of the queens, which was kind of surprising to me because that's a bit different to usual. So we then find out that Plain and Q are the bottom two this week, and I do agree, and I think it was quite obvious from the critiques because those two are really the only two that got some sort of negative critiques. And we find out that Nymphia Wind is the winner of this week's challenge. And as I said, I do agree because I do think she had the best book cover, and I also think she did really well in the interview. Plain and Q are the bottom two, and they lip sync to Better Be Good to Me by Tina Turner. In the end, we find out that Plain won and Q, unfortunately, was told to sashay away. Okay, so now let's move on to the results of the Have Your Say poll, where you get to vote on whether you agree with the outcome of this week's episode. And like last week, I did switch up these questions to make them a bit more relevant to these episodes. So question 1 was, do you agree with the outcome of this week, i.e. tops, bottoms and elimination? And we had 86% for yes and 14% for no. And I do agree, I don't think it was that surprising this week. I do think unfortunately Q and Plain were the bottom two, not just from the critiques but in general. And Plain I think does have a better track record than Q, so I can unfortunately see why Q was eliminated. Question 2 was, in your opinion, who had the best book cover? And we had 82.1% for Nymphia Wind, which, as I said, is not surprising. I definitely thought she had the best book cover of everyone as well. Next, we had Saphira Crystal with 14.9%, which again is not that surprising because I do think she had the second best. And then we had Plain Jane with 2.5%. Question 3 was, in your opinion, who was the best in the podcast? This vote was a little bit more split, but in first position we had, with 52.7%, Nymphia Wind. And as I said earlier, I do think she did really well in the podcast. I thought she opened up and was very genuine about it, but also had enough humour to make it interesting. Next, we had Saphira Crystal with 41.6%, which, as I said, I also agree. I think that Nymphia and Saphira both did equally well. I think the reason, in my opinion, that Nymphia won is because I think her book cover was slightly better than Saphira's. And then we had Plain Jane with 3.6% and Q with 2.1%. Question 4 was, in your opinion, who had the best runway look? And with 40.7%, we had Nymphia Wind. And I can see why. Although I did choose Saphira as my favourite for this week, I did think that Nymphia's was amazing. I really loved it. Nymphia always has such good runway looks, and I think they're always so detailed and every element is thought out. So I can see why she got the first in this vote. Next, we had Plain Jane with 33.4%, which did surprise me slightly because I did really like Saphira's, so I'm surprised that it wasn't second. But I know some people online were saying they thought that Saphira's had a slight fit issue, but I can see that Plain Jane was also really good. I think Goddess always looks really good on the runway, and I think the gold is such a lovely colour as well. Then we had Saphira with 18.9% and Q with 6.9%. Next, we had question 5, which was, in your opinion, who should have won this week? And with a whopping 77.5%, which is the vast majority, we had Nymphia Wind. And as I said earlier, I definitely agree. I think she did the best in both the photo shoot and the interview. So in general, although Nymphia was having some struggles and worries about writing, I think that she definitely was on top this week. And then next we had Saphira Crystal with 19.6%, which makes sense because she was probably the second after Nymphia. And then Plain got 2.5%, which makes sense because she and Q were in the bottom two. Question 6 was, in your opinion, who should have been eliminated this week? And I think quite a conclusive result this week. We had 85.6% for Q. And unfortunately, I do have to agree. I do really like Q. I thought she had amazing runways, super talented, and I thought that she was really fun on the season. But I do think of the top 4, she had the weakest track record. So I do think, unfortunately, I agree that she deserved to be eliminated this week. Next we had Plain Jane with 9.3%, which makes sense because she was also in the bottom 2. And then we had Saphira Crystal with 3.1%. And then for question 7, we had, in your opinion, who is going to win the season? And interestingly, we had Saphira Crystal with 60.5%. And the reason I think this is interesting is because although Saphira has been in the top for this question in the polls so far, I have noticed that so far, when someone gets a win or a loss, it usually does affect this question overall. So I was wondering whether Nymphia's win this week might push up Nymphia's share a little bit more. And Nymphia was in second place, which does make sense though, with 29.1%. And then we had Plain Jane with 10.4%. And then finally, I added in a question because we saw that at the end of the episode, they said that next episode, they're going to be doing a lip sync smackdown with the eliminated queens to win $50,000. So I said, which of the eliminated queens do you think is the most likely to win the lip sync smackdown? And with the biggest share, we had Morphine Love Dion with 48.6%. And I think this does make sense because Morphine was the latest to be eliminated before Q, and she's also proven that she's an excellent lip syncer. So I'll be really interested to see how she does next week. Next we had Mirage with 32%. And I can definitely see why people said this. Although Mirage only really lip-synced once and she didn't know the words, so it wasn't that great, I think you can tell that Mirage is an excellent lip-syncer because of her talent show. And in general, some of the things we've seen online from some of her shows, I think she is going to be an extremely great lip-syncer. And then in third place, we had Maya Iman LePage with 14.4%. And again, this does make sense because Maya is kind of, I would say, the lip sync assassin of this season because she survived so many lip syncs. So I think this is going to be really interesting to see who wins the SmackDown, and I'm really glad that they are shaking up the format a little bit and they're allowing the eliminated queens to do something extra, come back and potentially win some money. Okay, so let's move on to the comments for this week. And I think one of the topics in general that got quite a few comments was about it going to a top 3 rather than a top 4. So for example, my Patreon member Alan said, "Perfect top 3, looking forward to a great finale and so happy the eliminated queens get to come back and lip sync." Which I definitely agree with, and I will say I was also gagged that it was a top 3. And another of my Patreon members, Shelby, said, "Happy for the top 3. It did seem a little arbitrary and sad to send Q home at this point. Why not keep top 4 for the last episode and let them have fun together? Otherwise, what a really fun episode, especially getting to see Ru so hands-on in the photo shoot. I don't think I've ever seen him that physically close to the queens." And I definitely agree. I did think it was a little bit sad that Q got sent home. I think it would have maybe made more sense for it to be a top 4, but I do think that they do need to shake up the format to keep it a bit interesting, so unfortunately I suppose Q suffered the consequence of that. My other Patreon member Ashley said a similar thing and said, "I thought it was going to be a top 4, but I'm happy with the top 3 that they chose." And on a similar note, my other Patreon member, William, said, "This was honestly so shocking. You could see Q was thinking to herself, this isn't happening, this isn't real. And as she's about to walk away, she's waiting for Ru to say she's staying. But overall, Q did absolutely amazing. Can't wait to see her go from here." And again, I do agree. I was thinking it was going to be a little bit of a Candy Muse moment. Do you remember on season 13 when Candy was technically eliminated after her lip sync with Simone? And then RuPaul kind of said, as she was walking away, "Oh no, stop, you're staying." I thought it was going to be something similar with Q. Unfortunately, it wasn't though. And this topic did come up in the comments on the poll as well. So for example, someone said, "I was 100% expecting this to be a fake out elimination just like last season." And then someone else said, "I felt so bad for Q, she should have stayed, she deserved to be in that finale." One other topic that came up quite a lot is people were saying that they're not sure who they think is necessarily going to win. For example, one of the comments said, "I have no idea who's going to win. First I thought it was Nymphia, then Sapphira started picking up steam and I thought it would be her, then Plain Jane got her 4th win and Sapphira flopped in the makeover, and now Nymphia has a 3rd win and no bottoms. I'm so torn." I do agree though that it has been kind of difficult judging who is going to win the season, because it did seem that Nymphia was on top at the beginning of the season, and then like they said, Sapphira started to then overtake and got more wins, and we've seen that in the polls as well, that Sapphira has kind of come out on top in most of the recent weeks, whereas up till midway through the season, Nymphia dominated that and people thought she was going to win. And then I think Plain Jane has also had a little bit of a spurt at the end of the season and has started doing really well. However, overall, I do think probably on balance, Sapphira is the most likely to win, but I think they could arguably give it to any 3 of them and justify it. But let me know in the comments what you think about this. Okay, so we're now going to talk about a little bit of recent online drama that involved Plain Jane and also a mandatory meeting calling out toxic fans. We'll start by talking about Plain Jane, who was calling out fans who made Q leave Twitter, but the same thing now appears to have happened on Instagram as well. So you may remember that I did talk about this in one of my previous videos. A few months ago, Q clapped back at some mean comments on Twitter, which went quite viral at the time. And these tweets have since been deleted, but I found them on Reddit. So it all started when Q replied to a few comments that were critical of Q. For example, this tweet when someone said, "Are they really going to give Q the win? What the F did they see in her?" And Q replied saying, "All I see in you is a rotted C word with a social media account. Pretty effing unimpressed. You should be used to that though, right?" And there was another tweet where someone said, "Plain Jane, gather Q again for me, boo." And Q replied saying, "Gather your effing self for being the least impactful bee on my plane of existence, crooked face ass." And there were several other similar tweets that Q replied back to, and some people then criticised Q and said that her responses were too much. Around the same time, some other season 16 queens, such as Hershey LaCourgette and Megami, also tweeted about the situation when someone said that Drag Race had become too nice. And Hershey said that if the queens are too mean on the show, it will affect their careers. And Megami said that it's the fandom's fault that the show is like that, because the queens used to pop off in the older seasons, but now the fandom isn't mature enough for real shade. Plasma also talked about the situation and said that drag is art, but you wouldn't go and point at a painting and tell the artist to take their own life, which is presumably a reference to the fact that the queens receive many death threats. Q then tweeted and said that you wanted her to be more active on Twitter, which is what she's doing, and she's clapping back and giving people the attention they so desperately craved. However, shortly after that, Q deleted her Twitter, and at Roscoe's this week, Q said that she did that to protect her own peace, and she also said that people on Twitter are mean and angry all the time. However, it looks like Q is now taking a break from Instagram and social media in general. A few days ago, Q posted an Instagram story where she said, "Taking some time away from posting right now, but I want to hop on and say thank you to everyone who has sent love over the past couple days. I see it and I'm so grateful." Shortly after that, Plain Jane tweeted, seemingly in reference to Q's Instagram story, and Plain said, "I used to be able to clown on my sister Q so fiercely, but now I can't because she's actually down about how the fan base is treating her. Thanks a lot, Twitter, for ruining that for me." Plain then followed this up in another tweet and said, "Like we could have all had fun with her Delulu edit, but once again you took things too far. It's not that deep, and end of the day, she's still sickening." And Plain of Q have both said that although they playfully shaded each other a lot on the show, they are actually very close in real life and they're good friends. So it looks like Plain was defending Q and pointing out that the toxic fans were too mean to Q and it made her take a break from social media after receiving too much hate. And there was also a similar incident involving a mandatory meeting who called out someone who had made a mean comment about her. What happened was Amanda posted this photo on Instagram, which is one of the looks that she was going to wear on Drag Race but didn't get to. Someone then reposted this photo of Amanda and said, "Her taste is nauseating. This image makes me so uncomfortable. I've never felt the need to shame a queen into quitting drag until now." And it looks like Amanda then found out about this post and she responded to this person's post by reposting on her Instagram story and said, "Well, you know what? Every picture on your page is pretty effing ugly, and I hate all of your outfits. Your art looks terrible, and I genuinely think the world would be better if you shut the F up, deleted all your accounts, and never left your house again. Kisses." The user then posted another Instagram story and said, "Oh my god, I was receiving random hate comments I was like, but apparently Amanda reposted my story. I didn't even tag her in it and deleted it after an hour. Anyways, I wanted to come on here and say anyone that's a fan of hers has zero gauge of taste or aesthetics. Liking her drag is equivalent to having no taste and I'll stand 10 toes on that. It's no shade. She's a very nice girl, but her looks and taste level are booger. Sorry, I reiterate, she is nice. I thought she was very sweet on Drag Race, but her personality and aesthetics lay in two different universes. I agree that she is nice and don't agree that she has good taste. Okay, have a nice day, meat sticks." And Amanda then tweeted a little while later, seemingly in reference to this and said, "Been minding my own business all day because one of you internet cigarette emojis really peed me off when I woke up." However, neither she or the other person seem to have posted any more about the situation since then. But this is a really good reminder that what you say online does affect the queens, and they often do see it even if you don't tag them, because people will send it to them, and it's really not nice. So please enjoy this video and any other drama content passively, and don't send hate to any of the queens, and that includes in the comments on this video. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say video for Drag Race Season 16 Episode 14. Are you excited that they're doing a lip sync smackdown with the eliminated queens next week and switching up the format? And who do you think is going to win the season, and is that different from who you want to win the season? Let me know in the comments. And I'd just like to give a special shout out to my newest Patreon member, William, who joined in the You're a Winner Baby tier, and also Anna, who upgraded from Shantae You Stay to the You're a Winner Baby tier. William and Anna, you are both winners, baby. And I'd like to say thank you to all of my incredible Patreon members for your ongoing support. In the Shantae You Stay tier, we have Amy, Becky, Charlie, David, Emmy, Kerry, Linda, Shelby, and Stephen. And in the You're a Winner Baby tier, we have Alan, Anna, Ashley, Bailey, Emerald1508, Ethan, Josh, Kat, Lisa, PC Smush, Rachel, Rochelle, Sam, and William. You are all absolutely incredible and I'm blown away by your support. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon. I really appreciate it and it really does make a huge difference to my channel. And if you'd like to have your comment featured in my Have Your Say videos, as well as get early access to my videos and priority when submitting interview questions, please consider signing up to my Patreon and supporting my channel, and I'll put a link in the description. Please make sure you like, comment and share this video as it really helps support my channel. And of course, please make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date about new uploads. Thanks again for watching and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!